This episode was originally released as a bonus episode of Real English Radio and is now being released to the public. Enjoy. What's going on, my friends? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Real English Radio. I am your host, Tony Kaizen, here to put some more authentic English and thought-provoking ideas into your life. Today, we're talking about the topic that has affected all of us in one way or another, and that topic is parenting. Being a parent is one of the many things in life that doesn't come with an instruction manual. So naturally, anyone who decides to become a parent is bound to make mistakes with the kids at some point. Now, I don't have kids, but I have to imagine that as a parent, you're making mistakes all the time. I mean, as a human being, we're making mistakes all the time. So I'm sure there's no difference. One of the most detrimental mistakes that I've seen countless times and also experienced myself is what some people might call over-functioning for one's children. Over-functioning is basically doing things for your children that they can do for themselves. Now, some people say they do it out of love. Others do it out of fear. But at the end of the day, constantly doing things for people that they can do for themselves isn't always a simple act of kindness. Sometimes you can train those people to be so dependent on you that they can't do anything for themselves. And that is not good for anyone. So in today's episode, we're going to listen to a short clip from a conversation about this topic, and I'll be here to explain all the nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and then I'll leave you with something to think about. So let's check it out.
Honestly, the best example that comes to mind is overfunctioning for your child.
Talk about that.
So doing things for your child that you know they can do for themselves, right? And overfunctioning, helping them too much with homework, letting them off on chores. And again, it comes back to the same thing. It comes back to parenting from a place of fear. I'm afraid my child's going to be upset. I'm afraid my child's going to have a fit. I'm afraid my child is going to feel pain from this thing that I want them to do that I know is good for them. And so what happens is kids are smart. They can figure out really easily and very quickly. And I don't mean maliciously, but if mom or dad are going to overfunction and they're going to worry more than the kid is about homework or whatever it is that they have to do, they're not going to worry about it. Why would I? I'll listen when I have to listen. And so what happens is parents, and this happens to all parents, but I would say maybe a little bit more for moms, is they end up completely exhausted and doing the nice, kind thing, right? Nobody appreciates me. No one ever thanks me. Nobody realizes how much I do around here. And part of that is you are over-functioning for everyone. You're teaching people how to treat you, right? If you actually say to your child, I love you, and you know what? I love you enough for you to be mad at me. You're going to do that job for yourself. You're going to be the one that does what you need to do. You're going to finish that homework because I believe in you and I know you can do it. That's the kindness, right? That's the operating from a place of love because you love them enough to know that they can do it. And the hardest thing about being a parent is if you don't teach your child these really important lessons, life will. Life is a much harsher teacher.
All right, my friends. Now, as I always say, don't feel too bad if you couldn't understand everything that was said in that clip, because there definitely were some more advanced phrases or expressions that you might not hear on a daily basis. So I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and explain a few things as we listen to that clip one more time. Let's do it.
Honestly, the best example that comes to mind is overfunctioning for your child.
Talk about that.
So doing things for your child that you know they can do for themselves, right? And overfunctioning, helping them too much with homework, letting them off on chores.
Okay, so the basic idea is she's saying that a big mistake a lot of parents make is over functioning for the child. And then the interviewer says, talk about that. So now she's giving examples. She's saying doing things for your child that you know they can do for themselves, helping them too much with their homework or letting them off on chores. So when she says letting them off, this is like an idiomatic phrase or expression, which basically just means excusing them from a responsibility that they have. So if I let you off on chores, it means I basically say, it's all right, no problem. You don't have to do it, even though it's your responsibility. And if I'm not mistaken, this comes from the complete phrase is to let someone off the hook. And what that means, again, is just to excuse someone from a particular responsibility. So you have a responsibility and you don't fulfill that responsibility. You don't do what you're supposed to do. And the person who holds you responsible instead of reprimanding you or yelling at you or taking away privileges or anything like that, if they let you off the hook, they basically say, it's all right, don't worry about it. You know, there will be no consequences for you not holding up your end of your responsibilities. I really hope that makes sense. So letting them off on chores is like you told them they had to clean the house and wash the dishes and cut the grass. And then at the end, when it's time to actually do it, you don't make them do those things. You probably do them for them. Hopefully that doesn't sound confusing. You probably do the chores for them instead of making them do it. You're letting them off, right? You're basically saying you don't have to do it. Don't worry about it. And she's saying that's a problem, helping them too much with homework, letting them off on chores, stuff like that. So let me play it again.
Things for your child that you know they can do for themselves, right? And over functioning, helping them too much with homework, letting them off on chores. And again, it comes back to the same thing. It comes back to parenting from a place of fear. I'm afraid my child's going to be upset. I'm afraid my child's going to have a fit. I'm afraid my child is.
Okay, I'm afraid my child's going to be upset. I'm afraid my child's going to have a fit. So upset just means like unhappy. Maybe disappointed, maybe worried about something, but generally speaking, it just means unhappy. I'm afraid my child is going to be unhappy if I tell them to clean their room or wash the dishes or take out the trash or whatever. I'm afraid my child is going to have a fit. This expression just means to demonstrate anger or frustration in a very dramatic or exaggerated way. So maybe you've seen when you're out in public, some kid who asks his mom for candy or ice cream or something like that, and the mom says no, and the kid starts to scream and cry and say, but I want candy, I want candy. You know what I'm saying? They start making a scene and screaming and shit and just drawing so much attention to themselves. That is having a fit. You'll also hear some people say throwing a fit. So the child can throw a fit or have a fit. You know, it just means acting out, dramatically expressing their anger or their frustration or their disappointment, typically when they don't get something that they want. That's what it means to have a fit. So a lot of parents are afraid of that. I'm afraid if I tell my kids to do what they're supposed to do, if I give them more responsibilities, if I try to teach them to be independent and take care of themselves, they might be mad at me. They might not like me anymore. They might have a fit. You see what I'm saying? That's the basic idea. So let me go back a few seconds and we'll continue.
And again, it comes back to the same thing. It comes back to parenting from a place of fear. I'm afraid my child's going to be upset. I'm afraid my child's going to have a fit. I'm afraid my child is going to feel pain from this thing that I want them to do that I know is good for them. And so what happens is kids are smart. They can figure out really easily and very quickly. And I don't mean maliciously, but if mom or dad are going to overfunction and they're going to worry more than the kid is about homework or whatever it is that they have to do, they're not going to worry about it.
Okay, so after all this, she says, what happens is kids are smart. You know, they can figure out, or they can, how can I say, they're smart enough to understand. They can clearly see that if mom or dad is going to overfunction and do everything for me, then I don't really need to worry about it. If mom's going to do my homework for me, I don't have to care about homework. If dad is going to take out the trash for me, I don't have to care about taking out the trash. Kids figure this out, or they see and realize this very quickly and easily because kids are smart. They observe very well. And so then she says, they don't do this maliciously. And maliciously is something that's done with the intention of harming someone or causing distress. You know, you're trying to hurt somebody else. That's what it means to do something maliciously. A malicious act is an action that is only performed with the intention of hurting somebody else, causing them harm, making them feel worse, that kind of thing. So she's basically saying kids aren't doing this to be bad kids. They're not doing this to hurt their parents or because they're evil or something like that. It's just really common sense. It's like if somebody else is going to do it for me, I have no reason to care about doing it for myself. That's really the basic idea. All right, so let me go back a few seconds and play it again.
They can figure out really easily and very quickly, and I don't mean maliciously, but if mom or dad are going to overfunction and they're going to worry more than the kid is about homework or whatever it is that they have to do, they're not going to worry about it. Why would I? I'll listen when I have to listen.
Okay. One thing that might be confusing. She said, so if mom and dad are going to overfunction and do everything for the kids aren't going to worry about it. Why would I? Why would I? I'll listen when I have to. So that question, why would I? Maybe it confused you, so I'll just explain it really quick. She goes from talking about the kids, third person plural, and then she says, why would I? As if she's speaking in the first person, but she's really speaking from the perspective of the kid. She's saying, if my parents are going to overfunction and do everything for me, I'm not going to worry about it. Why would I? Which is like, what reason do I have to care? Why would I care? Hopefully that's clear. I just wanted to make sure that part wasn't confusing, because, I mean, she did say it kind of quick. And if you're not used to that way of speaking in English, I imagine it might have been confusing, but hopefully now it's clear. So let's continue.
Is that they have to do, they're not going to worry about it. Why would I? I'll listen when I have to listen. And so what happens is parents, and this happens to all parents, but I would say maybe a little bit more for moms, is they end up completely exhausted and doing the nice, kind thing, right? Nobody appreciates me. No one ever thanks me. Nobody realizes how much I do around here.
Okay, so she set the scene in saying these parents are overfunctioning, doing too much for their kids. The kids learn very quickly. They don't have to care about taking care of their responsibilities or anything like that. And so all parents experience this, but according to her, she's saying maybe a bit more for moms. What happens is they end up completely exhausted. So end up, the phrasal verb, we use it to describe like the final result of a situation or the outcome, So what happens at the end, they become completely exhausted, or they end up completely exhausted. And exhausted is just like extremely tired, right? Because you've been overworked, or you're just trying way too hard and you just have no more energy. You're done. You need sleep for a week. You're exhausted. And that's what happens, because they end up doing what she calls the nice, kind thing. Excuse me. The nice, kind thing. And I'm not sure exactly what she means by that, although I do have some ideas. But basically, if I had to summarize it, she's saying these parents end up exhausted and complaining, saying things like, nobody appreciates me. No one ever thanks me for what I'm doing. Nobody realizes how much I do around here. And so the phrase around here, typically it just means like in this immediate area. So you might be walking down the street and somebody might ask you, hey, do you know if there's a barbershop around here? Do you know if there's a grocery store around here? It just means in the area. So in this context, it really means just around the house. In the bathroom, the kitchen, the bedrooms, outside, inside, whatever. Nobody appreciates all the stuff I do in and around the house, just in this area. And in this case, the area is the house. I hope that makes sense. So this is what happens is people end up training their children to be dependent on them. They don't make their kids do things for themselves. They don't make their kids learn how to be independent. And in the end, they end up regretting that, because then their kids just learn very quickly, I don't have to care about any responsibilities. Mom or dad is always going to do those things for me. And then the mom or the dad ends up resentful, like, man, these ungrateful fucking kids, they don't see how much work I'm doing. And it's like, well, you chose to do that. It's like, you could have made your kids do what you wanted them to do, but you were so afraid of them being mad at you or not liking you for a few minutes that you just did it for them, So it's like, you really have nobody to blame. You know what I'm saying? That's the idea that I'm taking away. All right. So let me go all the way back to the beginning. Actually, we haven't even finished, but that is pretty much everything I wanted to explain from the clip. So I'll go back to the beginning, play it one more time, and then we'll continue.
Honestly, the best example that comes to mind is overfunctioning for your child.
Talk about that.
So doing things for your child that they can do for themselves, right? And overfunctioning, helping them too much with homework, letting them off on chores. And again, it comes back to the same thing. It comes back to parenting from a place of fear. I'm afraid my child's going to be upset. I'm afraid my child's going to have a fit. I'm afraid my child is going to feel pain from this thing that I want them to do that I know is good for them. And so what happens is kids are smart. They can figure out really easily and very quickly. And I don't mean maliciously, but if mom or dad are going to overfunction and they're going to worry more than the kid is about homework or whatever it is that they have to do, they're not going to worry about it. Why would I? I'll listen when I have to listen. And so what happens is parents, and this happens to all parents, but I would say maybe a little bit more for moms, is they end up completely exhausted and doing the nice, kind thing, right? Nobody appreciates me. No one ever thanks me. Nobody realizes how much I do around here. And part of that is you are over functioning for everyone. You're teaching people how to treat you, right? If you actually say to your child, I love you, and you know what? I love you enough for you to be mad at me. You're going to do that job for yourself. You're going to be the one that does what you need to do. You're going to finish that homework because I believe in you and I know you can do it. That's the kindness, right? That's the operating from a place of love because you love them enough to know that they can do it. And the hardest thing about being a parent is if you don't teach your child these really important lessons, life will. Life is a much harsher teacher.
Okay, there's actually one word I didn't explain, and it's harsher. She said life is a much harsher teacher. Now, if something is harsh, it means it is very, very severe, very strong, very cruel. You know what I mean? Let me see if I can find some other synonyms really quick. Harsh synonyms. Grating, jarring, grinding. None of these are adequate. Cruel, severe, savage, tyrannical, ruthless is probably a really good one. Ruthless. And just in case you don't know what that means, ruthless is having or showing no pity or compassion for others. I think that's a very good synonym for harsh in this case. So what she's saying is basically you have to love your kids enough to make them learn how to do things for themselves, to teach them to be independent and responsible and self-sustaining. Because if you don't teach them what they need to know to survive in the real world is going to teach them in a much harsher way, in a much more ruthless way. No compassion, no pity, no empathy, no nothing, because the world doesn't give a fuck about your kids. It's just a fact. Only you care about your kids in reality. And so you have to teach your kids to care for themselves, because if you don't, life is going to teach them the hard way. And they're going to be very confused and very frustrated and probably sad. They might fall into depression when they realize, damn, I'm 23 years old and I don't know how to do anything for myself, because my whole life, my parents did everything for me. And the parents during the childhood felt justified saying, no, I love my kid. I want to treat them with kindness and I want to protect them. When in reality, you're essentially handicapping your kids. You're crippling them. And just in case you don't know what that means, it's like if somebody's crippled, it typically means that they can't walk without support. So like the person who needs a cane to support their weight when they walk, or somebody who's in a wheelchair or something like that, they're handicapped. They have some type of disability that keeps them from functioning in a quote unquote normal way, like a healthy human being would. So if you think about that metaphorically, if you're handicapping or crippling your kids, you're basically robbing them of the much needed independence that will serve them in adulthood. And you're justifying it by saying, no, but I care about them and I want to protect them. When you're really doing the opposite. You're doing something that feels nice in the short term, but in the long term, you're really fucking them over because you can't be there for them forever. And what's funny too is like, if you raise a kid like that and they don't know how to do shit for themselves and they're so dependent on you, eventually you're going to get tired of your kid. I mean, 30, 40 years old and your kids are still calling you for money or assistance or whatever. I mean, like, it's normal to call your parents as an adult and ask for advice, or sometimes you do need a couple dollars, but I'll pay you right back. That shit happens. But I mean, if an adult, a 30-year-old adult is depending on you the way a 3 or 7 or 10-year-old child would, I think it's a problem. You know what I mean? And anyway, this is just one of the possible results of over functioning for your kids. But let me go ahead and get into the main takeaways from this clip, because there are quite a few. So the first one, over functioning for your children. This is the overarching idea of this clip. And this term refers to the concept of parents doing things for their children that the children could do for themselves. And it often stems from a desire to help, but it can result in limiting the child's growth and independence. This is the problem with over functioning. Number 2, fear-based parenting. The act of overfunctioning often comes from a place of fear, such as the fear of the child being upset, the fear of the child throwing a temper tantrum or throwing a fit, it's the same thing, or the child experiencing some kind of discomfort. Some parents are so afraid of their child experiencing these things, so then they tend to overfunction so that their child doesn't have to experience these things. Number 3, children's perception and reaction. Children can easily understand and adapt to the overfunctioning behavior of their parents. They may not worry about their responsibilities. They may not take responsibilities for certain tasks because they know that their parents are going to do it for them. So why would they care? Number 4, exhaustion and a lack of appreciation. Many parents, and according to the speaker in this clip, especially mothers who overfunction for their children, often end up feeling very exhausted and unappreciated. They feel like their efforts are not acknowledged by their family members, and this causes them to feel resentful and frustrated and unappreciated, like I said. Now, number 5, teaching people how to treat you. It's extremely important. Overfunctioning for others often sends a message about how you should expect to be treated. It creates the opportunity, or it can lead to a cycle of dependence on you and a lack of appreciation. So basically, if you're constantly doing everything for everybody, you're training people to just depend on you for everything. You're teaching people you can look to me and depend on me for everything. Even though they didn't ask you to do that shit, you've just been doing it so long and so consistently, they learn just through observation. Oh, I don't have to worry about it because she's going to do it. I don't have to think about it because he's going to do it. You see what I'm saying? So you really need to be thoughtful when it comes to teaching people how to treat you. And I'm going to come back to this point once I finish reviewing the main takeaways. So, number 6, empowering children. The speaker in this clip, whose name is Jennifer Kolari, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, she suggests that instead of overfunctioning, parents should empower their children to do things for themselves, because this demonstrates a belief in their abilities and it promotes the development of their independence. So instead of trying to do everything for them, you should really try to empower them and teach them to do things for themselves. And finally, number 7, life is a harsh teacher. If parents don't teach their children certain lessons, such as independence, responsibility, accountability, life will inevitably teach those lessons to the children in a much harsher way, a much more challenging, ruthless, cruel way. Because, like I said earlier, the world just doesn't care about your issues. The world has its own issues. So I think one of the harsh realities as a parent is that you have to prepare your kids for the inevitable difficulties that they will face in life. No matter how much you love them and care about them and want to protect them, I think part of protecting them is allowing them to be exposed to pain and frustration and disappointment and failure, Because the earlier you get exposed to that with a parent that can guide you through those situations and feelings, I think the better. I really do. If you've never experienced real failure or rejection or disappointment before the age of 18, like, life is going to be really, really, really hard for you, bruh. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, those are the main takeaways from this clip. And I really identify with this clip because in my house, it wasn't my mom who was the one that was overfunctioning and trying to do everything for me and my sister. It was actually my dad, which is interesting to think about, because my dad, for whatever reason, he basically fit the description of the parents that Jennifer was talking about in this clip. It was just all about wanting to do everything for his kids and protect his kids and just be that one that everybody depended on. He wanted to be the rock and the foundation, and I'll provide all the money, I'll do all the work. I just want y'all to be comfortable and happy and satisfied. And it's weird because he grew up the exact opposite way. In his household, he and his 5 siblings, they all had to learn to do things for themselves. Cook for themselves, clean for themselves, get jobs, make their own money, develop social skills, fight, everything. They had to learn how to do it for themselves because my grandparents were constantly working. And so my dad's oldest brothers basically raised the rest of the kids. You know what I mean? And they just had to learn to be independent from a very young age. they were often outside of the house, in the streets, interacting with the world. And that's where you really learn how to sustain yourself in the world, is by getting out there, you know? And so it's kind of weird and ironic that when he had kids, he really took the opposite approach and was like, no, I want to keep them in the house. I want to make sure they have everything they need all the time. I want to make sure that they don't want for anything or need anything or don't have to ask for anything or make any real effort. And as a kid, of course, it's great because, you know, you're getting fucking presents and gifts and, you know, you're living the fucking life, man. You don't have to do shit. You just get to have fun and enjoy yourself. But as you get older, you realize like this is probably not the best thing. And as I can't speak for my sister, but for me, I got to an age probably like 12 or 13 where it was like annoying. Like I wanted to do shit for myself. I don't need you to babysit me or hold my hand in all these situations or, you know, treat me like a fucking prince. You know, I just want to like do my own thing. And I don't know, man. What I noticed as I got older and older is I had a lot less experience than many other kids that I used to hang out with who had parents that weren't over functioning for them. And when I became like when I left home to go to college, that's when I really, really, really understood how much I hadn't learned or experienced growing up at home, you know? And so I was able to adapt. I think I'm a pretty adaptable person. I was able to adapt and like really learn how to be independent and take care of myself and learn things that I just didn't learn at home because my mom or dad were doing those things for me. And so I think me and my sister kind of adjusted relatively well. But I still definitely felt the effects of my dad trying to like overprotect us and over provide for us and shit like that. I definitely felt the effects. And I think life is just so much harder when you grow up like that, when you don't have people who are encouraging you to be independent and do things for yourself, you know? And getting back to what point was it? Teaching people how to treat you. That's what I wanted to go back to. Because I just remember distinctly as a kid, this exact situation where my dad would like overfunction, spend money that nobody was expecting him to spend, or do things that nobody was expecting him to do. And in his mind, he's making sacrifices. He's doing what's nice or what's right for his family and for his kids and for his wife and everything. When nobody really asked him to do it, nobody was expecting him to do it. And if he hadn't done it, nobody would have cared. And then when he does those things and nobody really appreciates it or says anything or notices, then he would get like really frustrated and annoyed and resentful. And it's like, you know how much money I spent and you know how hard I work and how much time and blah, blah. And even as a kid, I remember thinking like, yeah, but nobody asked you to do all that, bro. Like you chose to do all that shit. So I just couldn't understand why he was like so mad that nobody would appreciate half the stuff he was doing. When half the stuff he was doing, nobody asked him to do. It wasn't necessary. It was just he wanted to do it. And in his mind, he was doing it for us when we never really asked or cared about those things. And I guess that could sound ungrateful, but it's just reality, you know? And so I remember from a very young age, those particular situations, which is like, you're doing all this shit really for you. And that's the funny thing about it is like parents in general, not just my dad, but like parents who are the overprotective types or they do everything for their kids. They like to tell themselves, I'm doing it for my kids because I love them and I want to take care of them and protect them. It's not for your fucking kids. It's for you. You want to feel like a good parent. You want to satisfy your ego and feel like you're doing what's right for your kids, but it's not about the kids because the reality is if you were doing what's best for your kids, life would look very different. You'd be teaching them how to do things for themselves because you know as an adult, you can't take care of them forever. They're not going to be kids forever. They have to learn how to be independent human beings if they're going to be successful at anything. And if that's what you really want for your kids, if you really love them, then that's what you're going to do, is teach them to be independent. But a lot of times, there are some parents who even love the idea of their kids being dependent on them forever because that continues to give the parents purpose in life. It's like all they know how to do is be a parent. And so I'm just going to set up the situation to where they always come to me. So I always feel like I'm being useful. I always have something to do with my time in my life. I'm taking care of my kids, even though they're fucking 16 and 19 and they should be taking care of themselves. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's really a selfish act that has nothing to do with wanting to take care of the kids and more so just protecting the ego, and continuing to have some type of purpose in life. I hope that makes sense because it's something that I observed in many families, many parents around the world, honestly. And so I think that's, it's weird because sometimes we really, even if you think about a very common thing that we complain about, which is kids being addicted to electronic devices and shit. I've always found it so strange that parents will complain about this when they are the ones that gave the kids the fucking devices. So how you gonna complain about your kids being addicted to their smartphone at 9 years old, or their tablet, or a computer, or the PlayStation, or whatever, when you gave it to them? You gave it to them. And it's like, and then you ask, why did you give it to them? Oh, because all their friends have one. I didn't want them to be left out. Oh, because they kept asking and kept asking, and I didn't want to disappoint them. I didn't want them to be sad. It's like, well, you can justify it however you want, but you still chose to do it. So how are you going to be mad at the consequences when you chose to do it? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. The same thing with like, oh, these kids don't know how to talk to people. They can't look you in the face and have a conversation. It's like, well, who sat them down and taught them social skills? Who taught them how to communicate with other people? Fucking nobody, because you weren't there to do it. It was easier for you to put the tablet or the phone or the PlayStation in their face and just say, be quiet for a couple hours. I've had a long day and I want to enjoy my TV series and a glass of wine. Sit down, be quiet. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it means or everything that it takes to be a great parent. I don't even have fucking kids. But I don't think you have to have kids to be able to observe these things and comment on these things. And I just find that a lot of times parents selfishly do things that make them feel good or that help them avoid challenges or difficulties or feeling bad. And they try to justify it internally by saying it's for my kids. And then when they feel the results or consequences of those actions, then they want to get mad and blame the fucking kids. It's like a huge lack of accountability in our society, I think. Not just with parents, I think with people in general. But right now we're talking about parents. And I think maybe if we took a bit more responsibility and a more active role in developing our kids to be truly self-sustaining, independent, healthy, functioning members of society, I think the world would just look different. And it's easy for me to say because I'm not saying it's easy to do. Obviously, you got jobs. Some people have 2 jobs and 3 kids, and they live in a big city, and they work 10 hours a day, and they're on public transit for 3.5 hours round trip, and just dealing with a lot of shit. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying in this particular context, you can't really complain about how your kids turn out when you're the main person that's responsible for how your kids turn out. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. But I do think that it's an issue that we kind of need to talk about more because in my experience, it's really not something that you like sit down and discuss with anybody. You just decide, you know what? I want kids, so I'm going to have kids. And then you have the kids and you just fucking figure it out. You know what I mean? Just figure it out. We'll see what happens. You're just rolling the dice every single time, hoping that it comes up 7. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's actually kind of strange that after so many years of people having kids, raising kids, starting families and whatever, and maybe they exist, I've just never seen like concrete resources on how to raise healthy, functioning children. I'm sure books like that exist, right? They have to. Why are they not more mainstream? You know what I mean? I don't know. It just doesn't seem to be something that we talk about a lot, especially today when it's like we have this mentality of nobody's going to tell me how to raise my children, right? I know what I'm doing. I raise my children the way I see fit. When all of us, if we're really honest, have no idea what the fuck we're doing. A lot of people just do what their parents did because that's all they know. Or they try to do the exact opposite because they completely disagree with the way their parents raised them, That makes me think of my dad, which like he grew up relatively poor, didn't have much. And I remember him saying multiple times, because I would talk to him. I was just a curious kid. I would ask him about the things that he was thinking about or why he did things or how his life was as a kid. And he said part of the reason that he would overfunction or try to just give to his kids and provide everything is because he went through such poverty, and like he remembers not having things or being able to pay for things or just having to struggle so much more that he never wanted his kids to go through that same struggle. And even as a kid, I remember thinking that was strange because it's like, that's what made you who you are. That's what made you strong and independent and able to make good money and provide for your family and be the foundation of your family, of your home. It was those struggles. So by removing those struggles from your kids' lives, you're handicapping them. You're making them weaker because when they inevitably face the struggles that life throws at all of us, they're not going to know what to do. They're not going to be able to handle it. So I always thought that was strange, you know? But I don't know, man. It's complicated, right? Because you never really know exactly what the right thing to do is. And hindsight is always 2020. And what I mean when I say that is like hindsight is basically what you see when you look behind you. That is hindsight. And 2020 refers to perfect vision. I don't know why they call it that, but if you have 20/20 vision, it means that you see perfectly in both eyes. You have no vision issues. So when somebody says everything in hindsight is 2020, it means like whenever you look back on the past, it's much easier to see things clearly. It's easier to see, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should not have done this. But in the moment, in the present, it's much harder to see those things because you're just lost in the moment and you don't have the best perspective. But after the moment has passed, 3 years later, you look back on that situation, it's much easier to see what the right thing was. But in that moment, you just couldn't see it. You were too deeply immersed in the moment, So in hindsight, everything is 2020. So it's easy for us as children to criticize our parents and say what they should have done and what they should not have done. But I think when you get older, you kind of have to get to a point where you can forgive your parents for everything they did or didn't do, because none of us know what the fuck we're doing, man. And it's unpredictable. There's no instruction manuals. And even if there were, there's no way it could apply to every situation that a parent finds themselves in with their children. So yeah, man, it's easy to look back and say things should have been this way or should not have been that way. I think part of growing up and maturing and becoming an adult is forgiving your parents for whatever they did or didn't do, which is easier said than done, I know, but I do think it's necessary. And it's important to remember that if and when you choose to have kids, right, is you're going to fuck up too, man. You're going to make mistakes too. It's just part of life, right? But that's it for now, my friends. I guess it's time to get out of here. Hopefully you have enjoyed this episode of Real English Radio. Feel free to hit me up on Discord and start a conversation about this topic. If you have kids or if you don't have kids, I think this is a very interesting thing to talk about. Or maybe you're thinking about having kids in the future and maybe you've never considered this idea and this aspect of being a parent. I do think it's really interesting. And like I said in the beginning, it affects us all at some point in life. So yeah, let's talk about this, my friends. But that's it for now, my friends. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for supporting Real English Radio. I am your host, Tony Kaizen, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.